How's it going? So, like I said before, I've been working really hard the past few days, and it's been murder. I mean, I've literally been like, okay, so just to give you an idea of how it's not just the past few days. It's been several weeks of this. Um, back in I guess December-ish, I was looking at how we might what we might do to get more people into the super traffic machine and sort of have the super traffic machine become a more substantial part of the Yagi Labs business. And so the thing that there were a few different ideas that were floated, and ultimately I decided that the best thing to do would be to um, do like a bonus training or a bonus component, and make that a monthly thing that I do. So you guys will know this already. If you're on the mailing list, you're familiar with how that's been rolled out. So this bonus material would be time released. It'll be like, you've got to be in at a particular time in order to have that component. And that would be given as a bonus for free to anybody who was a subscriber, mainly because what I wanted to do was to, I'm not really interested in creating other training programs. I'm just not. I did this for a while, and I think that it's way better to have a structured, a structured curriculum to make sure that people are on the same page, that they've built their businesses in a way that is somewhat consistent with my values and how I think that online businesses should be built. And so it's worked. But the original, so yeah, sorry, what I was going to say is it worked, and I decided that creating bonus content keeps the course fresh. It gives me new material. I have an opportunity to share new information, but I don't do it outside of the confines of that course. So it's always a prerequisite. I assume your knowledge, and this is a really important thing, by the way, because until recently, until I started to do the super traffic machine, I couldn't rely on people coming from the same background. Like every time I released a course, it had to be basically a beginner's course. Because you can't go, oh, let me release an advanced AdWords course, because who's your audience? Most people are, they've barely scratched the surface with AdWords. And that's, by the way, that's another thing. Whenever I send out an email where I start getting into like technical stuff about AdWords and tricks and techniques with AdWords, and like they're really cool things that I share. They're actually pretty good. There's some like major discoveries, and like there's some pretty clever ideas that I share. Whenever I send one of those are the least popular of all the emails that I send. It's the weirdest thing. I mean, you guys are supposed to be. This is how I think. When I say that, it's like you guys are supposed to be on my list because you want to learn about traffic, and that I'm the Google guy, so that's kind of what you're here for, right? So how come when I start talking about specific Google techniques, traffic stuff, it doesn't seem to have the kind of pull that you would imagine that people would be so that you would imagine it would. And it just I think that a large part of it is that many people are just not on Google. Many people are not yet, like they would like to be, but they're not on there. They're not on Google. They're not running ads there. And so having a course that puts people at a level where I can now talk to you, and the things that I say can be actually impactful and meaningful to you, that was really important. Because if I want to, release I want to do a training on some advanced concept of traffic management, there will be people who've at least done the basics, so they can get to the stage where that stuff is actually useful to them. So anyway, I digressed, a major digression there. I don't know why, but the idea that I wanted, that I was getting at, is that doing this bonus content, bonus module thing was actually it was a big undertaking. Writing a sales page for each bonus is in itself a project. Um, then to and by the way, I decided to only do that once every 3 months. Um, Doing a video on some new concept every month is also not easy. The last one, which was supposed to be only a 90-minute presentation, ended up being more than 5 hours. I don't know the exact count at the moment, but I do know it was over 5 hours. And it took literally all of January. All that I did was I was sitting there practicing the presentation, updating, like strategizing exactly how I'm going to go through it, how I would reduce waiting time. There was a point at which I built an automation script, which took a long time to run. So I'd already built it, and then I had to rewrite this script so that, because I figured I'm going to be in the presentation, we're going to be sitting there twiddling our thumbs waiting for this thing to run, to like finish running. And that was going to be a total waste of time. So I figured I had to like parallelize part of it. So I started to, I went and I rewrote it in a way that would run some things in parallel. And actually the hardware that we're using was capable of dealing with parallelization much better than serial requests. So just got a little bit techie, but the idea being that I did quite a lot of stuff to fine tune that presentation, and it still came out 5 hours. I spent a long time working on it. So when we finally released it and everything was posted to the back office and everything, I wanted to make sure that we also had a way for people to be able to review that information that wasn't just limited to video. And so I thought I had the brilliant idea that I'm going to send something in physical form as well to support the information. Now I thought physical form, maybe a transcript, pay somebody a few $100 to do a transcript for me. We'll send that. I looked at the transcript when it came back, and it was absolutely useless. I was like, who's going to be able to do anything with this? This is just filling space here. This is just wasting paper. It doesn't actually benefit anybody. I looked at it as like there's 100 and some pages, and this was 100 pages was just from the first part of the presentation, which ran 90 minutes. So this is just part one, and there was still another almost 5 hours of content, 4.5, let's say, hours of content. Another 4 hours of content, probably more by that point, that had not yet been transcribed, and we had over 100 pages in text. Like, this is useless. Like, these are instructions. Click here, click there. Like, you can't do anything with this unless you can see what we're saying to click. So I was like, okay, look, we're going to have to turn this into something that's more, like the Super Traffic Machine books, and we're going to have to go through and do this. So after having spent quite a bit of work on that, we started to build it out. And then we got, I don't know how far through. So I built it in Google Docs because of the, originally, because of the collaboration features. And because I had the girl who was doing the transcription, she was, I asked her to now do screenshots for the writing that I was basically doing. So I rewrote the instructions in text. Now it was me doing the writing, and she was taking the screenshots. And so this went on for a while before we realized that, oh shit, these images they're coming out really blurry, and Google Docs is not giving us a way to do anything with it. It's really restricting what we can do. So we had to switch to, at this point, LibreOffice. And I switched to LibreOffice primarily because I kind of hate Microsoft. I've found their stuff to be absolutely shockingly horrible. And with time, it only gets worse. It just doesn't get better. I left Microsoft Windows a few years ago, never looked back. I recently started to use it just a little bit because my kid wanted to access some things that he can't do on Linux. And so I had to start using a little bit of Windows. And for a minute, I was fooled into thinking, hey, it got better. And no, it's really shit. So we went with LibreOffice, and LibreOffice is actually really sophisticated for an open source software. It actually does things even better than Microsoft Word. So anyway, we redid everything, basically. We had to redo everything. And of course, when I say we, I mean me. The screenshot girl wasn't really getting what she needed to do very well, and so I had to go over the screenshots all over again, and it was just a total, oh my God, it just complete nightmare, having to go through all of this and put it together. But ultimately, we finished, and and the book was something like 290 pages at that point, at which point I realized, oh fuck, the font that I was using was actually, it's not licensed for, I cannot use it for commercial purposes. So there was there was an issue with the font and its licensing. I was like, fuck, I can't release this like this. So I went back and I chose another font that was similar, but was not quite the same scale. So I had to redo, I changed it, and that really messed with all the formatting, and I'm going back through this document again, and had to like fix all the positions, the images, and blah, blah, blah. And basically this thing raped my back. I'm not getting any sleep. Even when I come to sleep, I can't because of all the pain. Just so much pain. I love producing things like this, and I took a long, hard look at what I did, and I was like, yeah, okay, this is probably not something I want to do every month, but this does not take away from the fact that this is a significantly useful product in the end. And so we decided that we are going to continue down this road. We are going to continue to do things in this way. We're just going to try to reduce the amount of content, because perhaps 5 hours is a little overkill when it comes to the video, and perhaps 200 the page count went down, by the way, when we changed fonts, and it went down to something like 260 pages, which is cool, because we had more efficient use of the space as well. So figured that this is probably too long. It needs to be maybe 1/5 of the size. Basically, the presentation should have been more like an hour long. The content should have been, the text content should have been also 1/5 of this. So I'm going to try to do that on the next one. But all of this is to tell you a different objective altogether, actually. So now, let me lean in here and sort of get to it. So a few years ago, I ran into, I was at a wedding in Dubai, and this wedding was for a friend of mine who was working at IBM there, but we had studied at the same university, and most of the people that I knew at university, most of my friends at university were people from various parts of the Middle East. Primarily Iraqis, to be honest, because we had quite a lot of Iraqis in New Zealand, and most of them were studying computer science with me. And so when I left New Zealand many years later, it turns out most of those guys had, when they graduated and went to find work, they found that they could get good work, good paying jobs in the Middle East. And so my friend was having his wedding, and he invited me to his wedding, and I turned up, and just about everybody I knew from university was there. This is many, many years later. Just about everyone I knew was there. Either they were in a neighboring country, or they were flying in specifically for the wedding, or they were, there was something. There was a reason, but all of the people there were people I knew from back in those days when I went to university. And so I got into a conversation with one of them, and I said to him, it occurred to me to ask the question. I was like, bro, how's your back? Because, being a computer scientist and being a guy who, sits at a computer all day long, I figured he probably has back issues like me, unless there's something really special about how much I, how I work, or about my physique or something. He probably has some issues with his back too, because he probably programs all day long. So I said to him, well, how's your back? And he goes, oh, bro, it's fucked. Like that. I remember the way you're, it's like, oh, it's fucked. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. And we started to sort of compare notes, and this guy's, he's just as messed up as I am, physically. Like, he's really, his work has taken a serious toll on him. But I remember in that moment, because, looking around, everybody in that room was a computer scientist working at typically, good, big technology companies. Most of them were programming or were programmers, something of the sort. And most of them they made a living sitting down at a desk, which brings with it all kinds of pains, okay? All sorts of pains. And I remember at that moment feeling extremely grateful, because while all of these guys were sitting there busting their asses off, sacrificing pieces of their bodies like I was doing it for me. They were doing it for somebody else. They were doing it for somebody else. And that hit me hard. It's like, dude, I would sacrifice pieces of me any day for me, for my family, to create a good future for my kid, to have, a good life for my family, to be able to, build something of my own. I'd do that. I'd invest into that. I would sacrifice pieces of my health willingly, happily, every single day. I'd even, shorten my life in the process without any problem with it. Whereas these guys, they're probably doing the same thing, except that they're working for just that salary. And so at the end of the day, when that company decides they don't want them, they don't have need for them anymore, they can just say goodbye, and that's that. Anything that they had invested into making their employer more rich, more successful, have a better product, they just leave it. They leave it there. That's it. And so that was a major realization for me that about that. But I was reminded of this because, one more. So I was also talking, just to show you how far this goes. I was talking to the guy who did my infrastructure setup, my initial infrastructure setup. I hired a guy to help me with it. The tech stack was a little over my head. I didn't know what to do with it, and he came along, and so I hired this guy off Upwork actually, and he was this really smart Russian fellow. And so I would ask him about certain things. Oh, shall we do that? Or what happens if we want to do that? And he'd say more hemorrhoids and more headache, something like that. More hemorrhoids and more headache. And he'd ask it as a question. He'd be like, I got a question for you. Do you want more hemorrhoids and headache? Because basically that was the cost. Basically, he was saying that this is the cost of this thing. Is it worth it? Is it worth the hemorrhoids and headaches that you're going to get? Again, showing that this is a sitting down problem that you're likely, it's a shared issue that everybody who is working for an employer for an employer or otherwise, who's working at a desk is having. And by the way, sitting is actually in itself, it's a silent killer. From what I've read about it, it's something that is really, really bad for us. Unfortunately, there's no way around it. Well, there are some ways, but for me, those didn't work. In any case, so as you give up pieces of yourself, you remind yourself that it's worth it when you're working for yourself. And I was listening to. I hope I'm pronouncing his name right. I know I say a lot of names wrong, so forgive me. Simon Sinek, you probably have heard of him. So he had a book where he was talking about this idea of the competition and the infinite versus the finite versus infinite. And he says that basically there are certain things where it's not like when you compete on them, they're not really a finite game in the first place. So, for instance, you can be the winner of a chess match, okay? But if you say we're the number one company in such and such, well, that's for now so you won the number one company for the moment, but number one, it doesn't really matter. Number two is the fact that this is just today. Tomorrow somebody else could come along and be ahead of you, and it wouldn't really matter that you became number one. And so they were saying he was saying that um, he was saying that if you are competing in this game of basically the infinite and treating it as if it is finite, you end up having these bad metrics basically for what is success. And they're almost arbitrary. So it's like, we got to hit such and such numbers. And so based on that, on those numbers that you didn't hit, you might go, okay, those, that's profit numbers. So we're not going to hit our numbers this quarter or whatever. Then let's fire a bunch of people. That way we'll reduce our expenses, and in the process we would be able to hit those numbers. But so what? You hit those numbers. The problem is that it didn't really solve, like, okay, you won that contest, but that's not really the contest being run. And he says that, employees don't have, these people say, these millennials, they have no loyalty. Well, the reality is that the businesses typically don't have loyalty to their employees. They have loyalty to their numbers, and this is what they're trying to do. And this is why I think that a lot of people, when you're going into a job and you're working at that job, whatever that job is, you're giving up not just pieces of your health, you're giving up pieces of your life, like large chunks of your life. I mean, how many hours a day does a person work? When you think about it, you're taking away from somebody the best hours of his day are taken. He comes home, he has a few hours left with his family, to relax, to have dinner, whatever it is, and then go to bed. And that is what he is giving the company every single day of the week. The least you could do is to give him your loyalty, as in, hey, this guy has bills to pay, he's got commitments made, and these arbitrary numbers that you're trying to meet are going to, they're not really meaningful, and you're just trying to win in a game that is not really, nobody else is really racing. But if you actually were to play it as a more of a long-term game, you would actually do things differently. Like, those numbers are not that important. You just create a better product because you're trying to do something that's better than what you did before. You want to do better than you did last time. You want to beat yourself. I don't need to be the number one. It really doesn't matter. You're number one, you're number two. You just need to have improvement. You need to, and part of improving is to have a good workforce and a happy workforce. And so, I don't see any reason why you shouldn't let that employee feel that they have a sense of security in their position. Why would we threaten or have people in a constant state of threat over things that they can't help? Okay, the direction of the company and the choices that its leaders have made are ultimately the reason people get laid off. You're not laying people off because they didn't perform at their job, or they didn't meet their numbers, or they did some gross misconduct or something like that. Typically, if they did, then obviously that would be a good reason to fire them. But when you're laying people off, that's and also, what's wrong with letting people have a sense of ownership in the company? I think that the businesses that do give you a stake in the company as part of their compensation, I think those are they've got the right idea. I think that companies that don't really have a bad idea about how to run business. And there's a variety of these. Like, there's people. I have a friend of mine who his boss is, he treats people like they're his slaves. He doesn't actually he doesn't think that you deserve the humanity of some respect. He'll ask him to do something and then yell at him when he does the thing and it doesn't work out. And when he doesn't do a thing that in his opinion is wrong, he'll yell at him for not knowing better and doing it. And then eventually he's like, hey, let's get rid of him. And it's like, well, why? Sorry, why? I know the guy. I know that he is in my experience or in all my dealings with him, I know that this is a very dedicated, very responsible person. Even if you put competence aside, okay. So I'm not saying that he's incompetent. I'm saying put competence aside. Don't factor it into the equation at all. Okay, that is a very rare skill, or sorry, very rare attribute to have. Somebody who actually feels responsible and takes ownership of the work and ensures that it gets done, and gives it their best effort regardless of how that end result is. Dude, to me, that's an employee that is irreplaceable. That's an employee you should do everything in your power to hold on to. You don't threaten him. Oh, and the other one was, he's always docking his pay for this mistake or that mistake. Like, what the hell? Like, we're not dealing with children. That's a really bad way to run a company, and that's a very toxic work environment and a toxic boss. And I think that businesses that operate in that way are they're not going to last very long. And I think that if you are going to be building a business, you should put it in your mind that you are taking, when you hire an employee, you are taking on a responsibility. This person, assume you're going to keep them for life. All right, you assume you're keeping them for life. Of course, if they prove to not be, good or whatever, you're going to have to, make the right decisions to move with your business. But for the most part, you should do your very best to keep an employee for as long as they're doing their work, and especially if they prove to be somebody who has some of these attributes, which honestly, they're not going to show up on a CV. They're not going to be part of his experience or his knowledge or his educational background or anything like that. It's just going to be like my machine learning guy, the main dude doing machine learning work for me. Super dedicated, responsible, loyal, hard worker. Honestly, I feel humbled when I'm dealing with him, like to that extent. And that's another one. And another really important thing is I'll do another video on this at another time. But most of the people who are really successful, they say, I don't believe in mentors, and the main thing that they cite as their learning, where they get most of their learning from, is from their employees. And I think that that's the right attitude to have. That your employees are a great source of wealth and a great asset to you as a business owner, and learning from them should be a major priority for you. And of course, holding on to good people should be something that you're willing to even sacrifice yourself in order to keep, because those are they're jewels and they're really difficult to come by. So yeah, that's all I have to say on that for the time being. I know we covered a range of different topics, but I hope you'll bear with me. If you have any ideas or thoughts on this that you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you, of course, and ask your questions, make your, give me your opinions on what I said. And yeah, until the next video, take care.